Hello everybody, we're going to continue on with another retro themed video today. But first of all, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone for getting this channel to 100 subscribers. When I started this channel a couple of months ago, I had dabbled with doing videos for quite a while, but it was sort of sporadic. And I kind of wanted this year especially to do more of a focus on it, do like, one a week, keep some sort of schedule, try to improve them where and when I could. And, it was all for fun. I didn't really think it would grow too much. And in terms of views, the videos don't get a lot, but the few views it does get, it seems people do like them, and I really do appreciate that. So just a big thank you to anyone who watches these and has taken the time to comment, leave a like, or subscribe. It is really appreciated, and I do see all of that. And, if you do like this stuff, please do, feel free to leave comments and stuff like that and let other people know. Like I say, it is all super appreciated. Anyway, on to the next thing. As you can probably guess by this bit, we're going to have a look at the Sega Saturn. Sega's, I believe this was their fourth console. It was like the SG-1000, the Master System, the Mega Drive. And now this. The Saturn was released in 1994 in Japan, 95 in other territories. It was May 95 in North America, July 95 in Europe. It is a system that many people would probably would say it's quite an underrated system. It was I don't want to say it signalled any sort of downfall, because Sega are still around today and they're still quite powerful. But it was a bit of a reversal of fortune for Sega after they were riding so high with the Mega Drive. I think we went into that in the previous video. We talked about how many millions the Mega Drive sold worldwide and how much of a powerhouse it was, thanks to things like Sonic the Hedgehog and its kind of advertising and attitude that was very counter to, let's sort of say, the safer way Nintendo played things at the time. Sega sort of maybe tapped into something that, Nintendo didn't, and they were hugely successful for it. So, as time went on, you start to get the new console generations, much like we do nowadays, and there were a few in development. We had the N64 was in development at that time, Sega had this in development, and the PlayStation was in development. There were a number of others around the time that were also in development. And now you would think, building off the success of the Mega Drive, this would be just as successful, but for some reason it wasn't. Now the reasons for this are quite varied, and I'm sure there are other channels that have maybe done a deeper dive on this. It's kind of hard to give any one particular reason. Amongst them, there was infighting between Sega Europe and Sega Japan. Each company, each division was making different decisions that impaired Sega. There were other things like the launch for this didn't have, I guess, what you would call the killer app. One thing throughout the Saturn's lifetime is it didn't actually have its own Sonic game, which probably hindered it quite a bit. It had Sonic Jam, which I will show off just the cover on that, which was a compilation of Sonic games, but didn't have its own distinct Sonic game. It was facing competition from a number of sources. The PlayStation is the obvious one. The other sort of lesser ones, I'd say, were the Atari Jaguar, the Amiga CD32, and the Panasonic 3DO, which all three of those were failures in their own right. The Saturn probably did do better than all of them. There are also a few other weird decisions that Sega made along the way. Again, in the Mega Drive video, I touched on the two peripherals they released for the Mega Drive. That was the Mega CD and the 32X. The 32X was an add-on for the Mega Drive that gave it a boost in terms of power. Now, the weird thing about the 32X is it actually came out in December of 94 in Japan and January of 95 in other territories. It sort of created a conflict, I guess you could say. It was supposed to boost the power of the Mega Drive to be in line with maybe what the Saturn was, maybe as a stopgap measure, but you kind of look at it and you go, well, why would anyone want this? The 32X is known to have flopped. It didn't really have any killer apps, but it would have created maybe a little bit of confusion in the marketplace. Why would anyone want this? There were other decisions that didn't quite go Sega's way. There's a release date debacle they announced at a trade press conference. I believe it was an early version of E3. People were expecting the release date of the Saturn to be further on in the future, and then Sega turned around and went, "We're going to release this tomorrow." And retailers weren't ready for it. Buyers weren't ready for it. There weren't really any games prepped for it, so it just kind of flew in their face. And that was followed by, I believe, a famous press conference from Sony, where a Sony rep walked on stage, said something along the lines of $299, walked off to massive applause, and that was kind of a nail in the coffin. So, whilst it wasn't necessarily a failure, it sold 9.26 million. It is considered to have not done great. It did have a decent lifespan. Launched in 94 in Japan, discontinued in 2000 over there. Launched in 95 in Europe and America, and discontinued in 98. So I was always intrigued by the Saturn for quite some time. I never had one, never really played one growing up, but you always heard about it. I always wondered what sort of games there were for it and what it was like to have. I nearly got one when I was a kid, but my parents opted for the PlayStation instead, which in retrospect was probably a better decision. But I decided to get one a couple of years ago. I bought mine from Sawfum Retro Games. Bought it to be shipped up to where I live. And they're based in York, and I've seen them at conventions, and they're a lovely bunch of people. If you are ever in York, obviously there are restrictions at the moment, but when they're all lifted, if you ever find yourself in York, do go give them a visit. If you find yourself online, which you already are, go visit their Facebook, Twitter, whatever, check out their range of stuff. They're lovely people, very pleasant to deal with, and I've never had a problem with them with any retro system I've bought. I've bought a Mega Drive from them, I've bought Saturn, bought GameCube, I've had many games shipped to them from them across a range of platforms and never had an issue. So yeah, let's move on from that and let's actually have a look at the Saturn itself. So it was a move to CD media, much like the PlayStation and many systems at the time were, barring the N64. Very, very similar to the PlayStation 1 in terms of what you've got on there. You've got the flip lid there, you got power button and a reset button, and it's quite a solid box. I suppose kind of a prototype sort of Xbox design. It doesn't look too bad. Mine is a little bit dusty, it seems. On the back, you've got your various cables there for plugging stuff in. You've got your power, your AV out, and the final one is a communication connector. I didn't really research what that was for, but I believe this maybe had some very limited modem functionality. Certainly wasn't a fully online console like the Dreamcast was touted to be. I think there was some limited things. I've read up in the past about the Sega channel, which is something that you also had an expansion port, which I'll show you some things for that in a moment. Controller wise, I have two controllers for the Saturn. I have the standard Saturn controller, which has pretty nice D-pad. It is not as nice a controller as the Mega Drive one. D-pad doesn't feel quite as good, but it's still fairly nice and responsive. You get a start button there. Your buttons are very, very responsive. They've got that sort of pop that the Mega Drive ones had. What I don't like, however, are the shoulder buttons. Never really... I mean, when I got this, I was so used to other systems' shoulder buttons. These didn't feel great. Maybe for the time they would have been okay, but they just feel... They don't feel like buttons. However, if we move on to this was a recommendation from a friend of mine. It's like the Saturn 3D controller. Now this is quite a big piece of kit. It's got an analog stick, a nicer D-pad, your buttons with decent pop there, start button, and a little switch there. But also on the back, you have the triggers. So what we kind of got here with this sort of 3D controller, which I believe was made for games like Nights into Dreams, it's kind of a prototype for the Dreamcast controller. Now, I will be doing a video about the Dreamcast later on. I got a lot of love for the Dreamcast. But just from the feel of this, the size of it, the way the triggers are and everything, does very much feel like this is a prototype Dreamcast controller and a sort of thing, you know, a preview of things to come for Sega's console direction. And again, this is quite dusty. I haven't had this out in a short while. There's also another thing there at the bottom which never really had to use, but yeah. So there we go, that's your two controllers. So I'm going to show off quite a few games for it, but let's talk about that expansion slot. So older consoles used to have these sort of expansion slots, and the kind of thing that would go into them would be sort of a action replay cartridge. Now the Saturn has some limited internal memory, so the main reason you want to get something like this is to expand that to store more save games. Bit of a mistake on the Saturn's part not having decent enough memory, but again that's what the expansion port's for. It's not quite as pleasant as the memory drive slot for the PlayStation, but what can you do? So what can we do with this? Well, you can store more save games on there if you wish to. You can play imports. The Saturn has a really good library of Japanese games. It is one thing it's really known for. So if you want to play any imports on it, you can use this, and you can also add cheat codes to your games. You might not be able to do so. Say you're having trouble with Panzer Dragoon, infinite lives, infinite invincibility. You're having trouble with Sonic the Hedgehog, always have 100 rings or unlock Supersonic from the start, that kind of stuff. They kind of altered memory values in the game to give you certain cheat codes that weren't built into the game by the programmers. That was really, really cool. I had one for the PlayStation 2. When I was younger, I found it a bit hard to play games, and they were always kind of really cool. But you could do some really neat things with them. I also remember one of the WWF SmackDown games, you could use the action replay to start doing mad things like having 30-foot ladders and all sorts of bizarre tricks, and sometimes they can unlock debug functionality as well. So yeah, that's the action replay cartridge. If you are going to get a Saturn, I would 100% recommend getting yourself one of these. The next thing I want to look at is this. This is another, it's like a Sega Saturn Kai, I think it's called, and I just recently got one. Yeah, Pseudo Saturn Kai. Just recently got one of these, and it's like a cartridge that can have a variety of functions on it. Now the main reason I have one of these is because not only can I play imports with it, I can also play backups with it, which the Sega Saturn didn't have a lengthy lifespan, and the Sega Saturn didn't sell many worldwide as we went into it. 9 point whatever million does sound like quite a bit, but when you take into account all the territories and other systems that are being out there, that's not a lot. So sometimes games are quite hard to come by for this. There's one very famous one for the Saturn, Panzer Dragoon Saga. I'll talk about that in a moment. That will cost you upwards of about £400 not for a brand new copy, but for a boxed full copy of it. Might even be more than that. So there's very few ways to play certain games for this one, unless you have to resort to the good old realms of piracy, which I don't really like to advocate, but if we can get things legit. But these games are long discontinued. Panzer Dragoon Saga only had about 30,000 copies made worldwide, so it's not in heavy circulation. And that's the same for quite a few Saturn games, so this allows me to play backups on my Saturn. So it's also another thing that I would probably recommend if you're going to get a proper system. Emulation-wise, I don't know what the status is of Saturn emulation. I don't think it's amazing at the moment, but I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've looked into that. But we'll move on to the next thing, the games themselves. So I have quite a few games for my Saturn, and I'm going to show off, not going to show off all of these, but I'll show off a few. The first two that I can actually reach here are two Japanese imports. Now I'll probably show these off in a different video. First one is a visual novel called Evangelion Second Impression. This is sort of an alternate story set during the Evangelion timeline. It introduces a new character. It's all in Japanese and it's a visual novel, so good luck to me. But yeah, it's meant to be quite decent, and like I said, I'll probably show this off in another one. And the other Saturn thing I'd like to show off in the same video when I do it, you actually see me in the reflection now, is this Sadamao Illustrations. It's got like, it's just basically an image disc. It's got various sort of works that the character designer for Evangelion did, and it collates them all on this disc. So you can see like Nadia in there. You can see some promo art for Evangelion. That was I think that's like a Citroen branded thing. I've got that in the Demond art book in quite a bigger version. It's pretty cool. Released in 1997, towards the back end of the Saturn's lifespan. So those are some pretty cool things. The games themselves, let's have a quick look. So, kind of the main games for the Saturn. And some of these I don't have the proper boxes for because they would cost me quite a bit. But sort of the first one you kind of wanted to get, Nights into Dreams, was kind of... This is probably the game Saturn is remembered the most for. And that's kind of what your disc would look like there. So kind of a weird 3D platformery type game. It's bizarre. I'll definitely show this one off in a moment. The other one, which was kind of like the Saturn, another kind of like, I guess a killer app for the Saturn, Panzer Dragoon. Now, Panzer Dragoon Saga was a full-on 4-disc JRPG. Panzer Dragoon was an on-rails shooter. It's really, really good. It's brilliant soundtrack. Graphically dated, obviously, but it looks pretty good for today. This will be another one, definitely. We'll be showing this one off with footage. Some of the other games I have on here, and one of the ones, now I don't have the first one, but the Saturn actually launched with Virtua Fighter, which was immensely popular back in the day. I have Virtua Fighter 2. I'm not very good at fighting games, as I've established before, but you know, you kind of, this is one of the ones that you kind of have to get. I remember playing Virtua Fighter quite a lot on an arcade machine. But yeah, Virtua Fighter 2 was another one. I'll show off a bit of that. We also have... So one of the things I think the Saturn was quite good for, and maybe one of the things that kind of damned it, I believe it was quite hard to develop for compared to other systems at the time. The way it rendered 3D objects was different. I could be wrong on that, but I think whilst most places opted for polygons, the Saturn maybe opted for quads. I could be very wrong there. But yeah, Sega Rally Championship is another kind of arcade port, and this is really, really fun. Yeah, look at that. Incredible 30 frames a second. And there you go. That's another one on there. Other little oddities on there. I'll show two more. So the first one is another Japanese import. This is a pinball game called Necronomicon. It's the second part of a pinball series. Now, I like my pinball games quite a bit. They're always good fun. The main reason I got this one is because it has a soundtrack. Our song on the soundtrack done by John Petrucci of Dream Theater fame. So I kind of had to get myself that. So yeah. The other one we're going to look at is in this box. This is, I couldn't get the actual boxed version of this because it would have cost me over £100. It already cost me about £40 to get this, but it's like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It's Die Hard Arcade. I believe this might have been called something else in Japan, but yeah, the person who sent it, this must have been a box for PS Plus. But yeah, Die Hard Arcade is a really good kind of side-scrolling game, which, again, we'll probably see in action. So I think I have taken up enough time talking about this and just showing off like this. Let's actually have a look at the games in action. The first title on our list is Nights into Dreams, produced by Yuji Naga and developed by Sonic Team. This is considered one of the Sega Saturn's most famous and popular games and got critical and general acclaim when it came out. It's quite an interesting game. I can't really think of anything to sort of compare it to. But the basic premise here is that you control two kids who enter this world called Nightopia, which is sort of a dream world, with the help of a character called Night, who is an exiled Nightmaren. You have to stop the evil ruler from destroying the world and the real world. The idea is to kind of control knights through these flying sequences to gather enough points to defeat enemies, and then you'll go on to defeat a boss. The levels are timed. It's quite easy to control, and this is one of the games that the sort of 3D controller that I shown earlier is quite useful for. It's quite a colourful, fun game, really nice soundtrack, and I'll just sort of let the gameplay kind of speak for itself.
Next up is Panzer Dragoon, the first in the Panzer Dragoon series. This is, again, one of Saturn's most famous games. Of course, possibly the most famous of this series is Panzer Dragoon Saga, due, if nothing, to the fact that it was a limited, release, numbered release, only 30,000 out there, it costs so much now to get it second-hand. It's a fantastic JRPG. The others in the series are more rail shooters, where you're on the back of these giant dragoons, you are fighting various enemies. I suppose, like, comparison might be games like Rare's, maybe Child of Light or Child of Eden. I can't remember the name of it now. There's been quite a few in this series, and it's recently seen a remake in more recent years, and there will be a remake of Panzer Dragoon 2 as well that is now available on various platforms. What you've got here is a really nice soundtrack, very crisp gameplay that still feels good to this day. The graphics kind of look a little bit aged, but for when this game came out back in 1995, this looked fantastic, and I still think it looks pretty decent to this day. Don't really think I need to say too much for this one. Pinball Necronomicon is a pinball game in a sort of 3D style. It's a second in this digital pinball series on the Sega Saturn, and as mentioned, it's got 2 songs on its soundtrack that were made by John Petrucci, one of my favourite guitarists. I'll just let this one speak for itself.
In the shadows they live, of ancient tales they speak, in the stone they write, of the places they You can walk through the door, the cosmic landscape's touch, but be aware and understand that this is dark knowledge, and your soul might perish. Arkham Asylum. The book holds the tales of the dreams and nightmares that forever exist. In the shadows they live, of ancient tales they speak, in the stone they write, of the places hidden. Walk through the door, the cosmic landscape's touch. But be aware and understand that this is dark knowledge, and your soul might get lost. For the
So next up we have Die Hard Arcade, which is quite an interesting one. This was known in Japan by a different name. It was called Dynamite Decker because Sega didn't have the rights to Die Hard in Japan, so it was released as an original game. This is a 3D beat 'em up in the vein of something like Golden Axe or Streets of Rage. It's really, really fun. It's quite a rare one for the Saturn, unfortunately, so if you do have one, it's kind of hard to get hold of. I don't quite know if it's being released on any other platform, unfortunately. But I had a lot of fun trying this one out and checking it out. I know this has got quite a good fan base behind it. One of the interesting things here is that the core gameplay is broken into sections. It's interspersed with these quick time events, which I didn't realise you had quick time events in games going all the way back to the Saturn. But you do, and it's kind of these sections where he runs through a corridor or whatever, you press the appropriate button to perform an action, and it does create some fairly funny sequences. Yeah, I definitely say this is one to check out if you can. If anything, for the fact that you see this, you know, Die Hard in this style. Of course, the other Die Hard game around this time was Die Hard Trilogy, which you saw on the PlayStation and such. But it's definitely one to check out. Finally, we come to a game called Guardian Heroes, which is another side-scrolling beat-em-up, kind of similar to Golden Axe Streets of Rage. This one's interesting because it has RPG elements in there. So as well as picking your character at the start, you actually develop your character as it goes on by putting stats into various components, strength, intelligence, etc, etc. There's also, from what I understand, branching paths and multiple endings in there. One of the things quite interesting about this one is it's played along a 2D plane, but you can jump between the planes using the shoulder buttons, as opposed to a game like Streets of Rage or Golden Axe where you hold up and down to go along the planes. I absolutely love the visual style in this one, that early 90s anime style, and the gameplay feels quite good itself. Again, I think this is quite a hard one to find if you do want it legitimately. But it's definitely one worth playing, and I think this is one that has seen subsequent re-releases. I think this is re-released on the Xbox Live Arcade. Not quite sure if it is playable on the Xbox One. I think it might be. So it is still possible to get hold of it if you are on the Xbox. But yeah, this is one that I believe is quite beloved amongst Saturn fans and beat-em-up fans in general.
So there we have it. Just thought it'd be an interesting little video to take a look at this console and a few of the games there. Hope you all really enjoyed that. And I realise there's probably quite a few more that I could have spoken about, but there was enough time really to go through them all. So yeah, just thank you all very much for taking the time to watch this. Please do, as always, I know it's a bit of a meme with people on YouTube, but it does really help. So if you did like it, leave a like. If you feel inclined to do so, leave a comment. It's all super appreciated. And make sure you tell people about these things if you do like them. And yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you again in the next video.